In a time where CGI blockbusters dominated the charts and the days of guerrilla filmmaking action stars was thought to be long gone, an anomaly arrived by the name of John Wick, a sleeper hit that set the gold standard for modern day action flicks, introducing gun fu to the masses, causing the action genre renaissance, inspiring stuntmen to get behind the cameras and actors to work even harder on fight choreography.
They make it look easy, but it's not.
Almost a decade after the first film's release, Keanu Reeves is back as John Wick for a final outing, and he's not pulling any punches.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
Before we start, here's a little disclaimer. I'll be reviewing John Wick Chapter 4 in accordance with Chapter 2 and Parabellum, not on the same franchise standards as the first film for obvious reasons. Now that all that's out of the way,
let us begin.
Set several months after the events of the three previous films, John Wick finally starts his path of revenge against the High Table. He first takes out the Elder, increasing his bounty, forcing him to seek refuge in the Osaka Continental where the manager is his friend. His presence gets the hotel deconsecrated and attacked by the Marquis de Gramont, a man hired by the High Table to eliminate Mr. Wick, and an old acquaintance, Kane. This pushes him back to New York, where Winston informs him that his freedom can be earned if he challenges the Marquis to a duel, but to do so, John needs to be part of a crime family, sending him back to the Ruska Roma in Berlin. The duel is eventually set, with the Marquis for sunrise in Paris. However, with an ever-increasing bounty and entire city hunting him down, will John Wick be able to survive the night and make it to the duel on time? Concerning the plot, Chapter 4 is easily the weakest of the franchise and possesses the most glaring issues that sadly aren't made up for by incredibly well-developed characters, but is redeemed by some of the most unique action set pieces to ever grace the silver screen. Just to illustrate my point, some of the most elaborate action sequences of the franchise so far were the horse chases and attack on the Continental at the end of Parabellum. In Chapter 4, this happens in the first 45 minutes of an almost 3-hour-long film. The action is every single John Wick film combined on fucking steroids. This does bring me to the first major issue. Even with all we'd seen in past films, Chapter 4 requires your suspension of disbelief to be strained way more than it ever has been, especially during the fights where highly trained armored assassins never shoot from a distance, and when they do have the accuracy of a stormtrooper. Add to this the fact that they never aim for the head like their assassin counterparts, and people with long bows are faster than assault rifles. Yeah, that's not happening. Lastly, what really tugs on your suspension of disbelief is how everybody seems to have bulletproof suits, shrugging off high caliber rounds, and fatal wounds as if they were nothing.
'Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Your arm's off!
Another main issue is how John Wick globetrots to about 4 different countries, considering that in Parabellum he had to beg his old family, the Ruska Roma, to punch his ticket and brand him just for a trip to Morocco. Adding to this is how the plot sometimes forgets that the location isn't always New York, with a throwaway line justifying how the Bowery King has the same level of power and connections in Paris.
Oh, how convenient!
Before moving on to the positives, let's discuss the pacing. The film isn't able to mesh action and storytelling like previous outings, rather trying to advance the plot, stopping for an elaborate 15-minute action sequence, then resuming the story. As you can tell, that's why the film is almost 3 hours long. However, this is most prevalent in the first act, picking up just over an hour into the film when we're finally given a clear goal and stakes. Sadly, even then it isn't a straight line, rather a fetch quest of getting something that leads to another thing, and then we can finally reach our endgame.
Not a great plan.
How weak the first 2 acts are becomes even more apparent when the third act arrives, which is not only the strongest part of the film in terms of plot and character, but is arguably the strongest third act and ending of the entire franchise, original included. We now have a very clear goal, stakes, and urgency, with action used in relation to the story, culminating in a one-on-one personal conflict that grips you to the edge of your seat.
That was intense.
Since I've already dipped my toes in, let's move on to the positives. The film expands on the John Wick lore in smart ways that don't feel shoehorned in, and puts in the effort to make Mr. Wick a growing menace in the eyes of everyone in the assassin world. Chapter 3 was John facing the consequences of his actions, but 4 takes it a step further, not only making it the focal point, but finally showing our protagonist how he's basically become a plague, killing everyone he meets indirectly, whether they be friend or foe.
Consequences.
Yeah. Consequences.
Lastly, the film's action is superb and creative. The fight scenes always add an extra layer to the conflict and use location to its advantage. Let me explain. There's a fight scene in the Arc de Triomphe roundabout, and it could have ended there, but they go the extra mile of adding other cars to the scene as prominent elements. It sounds stupid, but there are films where the location of action scenes aren't justified. Why have a shootout on the docks if you're not going to use that to your advantage by adding that extra sauce of having shipping containers swing around or cranes falling? As a writer, always ask yourself, how can I add more external elements to make this mundane fight more exciting? As much as I think The Grey Man is a mediocre film, it's a perfect example, other than the John Wick franchise, to see what I mean. One of the most creative elements in Chapter 4 is Donnie Yen's character, Kane, and how he fights as a blind man. He's constantly touching everything and grabbing walls for spatial awareness, using motion detector traps to locate enemies, and always prioritizes hand-to-hand combat. It's fucking awesome.
Plan is out.
On the character side, our main players are Tracker aka Nobody, Kane, and of course John Wick. Winston and the Bowery King are also back but sidelined, their characters relegated to Quest Giver and Merchant respectively. The Marquis de Gramont is a generic one-note villain whose goal is to assassinate John Wick. He doesn't do it himself but dispatches others instead. His presence, however, is threatening enough to our protagonist, and we do get some personality, mostly stemming from Skarsgård's performance, although they could have done a lot more with his character. I emphasize this because Scott Adkins, Hiroyuki Sanada, and Rina Sawayama had less screen time than the Marquis, but leave a longer lasting impression on the audience who definitely wish they were in the film more.
Shame.
Tracker aka Nobody is a welcome addition to the franchise with a great performance by Shamir Anderson. He's an assassin out to kill John Wick.
No shit.
Although unlike others, he enjoys the hunt, always managing to find him and never making the first move until Wick's bounty reaches his desired price. Like most characters of the film, he isn't incredibly fleshed out, but this works to his advantage, as his character relies on mystery, and it turns out pretty well. Not to mention he has a dog sidekick and specific weapon sets to make him even cooler. Tracker feels like he belonged in the first John Wick film, and after seeing him be the only person in the franchise since Chapter 1 wearing an actual bulletproof vest, I don't think anyone can tell me otherwise. Kane is our main antagonist in the sense that he's the character actively working against our protagonist. Kane is the most fleshed out of the film, more so than John Wick, but as every great villain should be, he's a reflection of John, specifically who John was before being pulled back into the underworld. They are essentially two sides of the same coin. Kane made a deal with the Marquis, protection of his daughter in exchange for his services, and hunts Wick out of love for his daughter, knowing she'll be killed if he doesn't. John, on the other hand, hunts the Marquis out of his continuous revenge cycle for the one he loved, but as I stated before, doesn't realize this leaves more dead and perpetuates the revenge cycle, whether they be friend or foe. This is why their final fight is so compelling, even though there's little to no action. Accentuating this is the fact that they are both not only former acquaintances, but fear each other as well. A first in the franchise, showing John Wick scared of someone else's capabilities due to history.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
All of this is reflected in one line, the best of the film, uttered by Wick to Kane. Those who cling to death live. To which Kane replies, those who cling to life die. It's the theme of each character handed to you on a silver platter in a way that feels earned and not expository. Donnie Yen gives not only a stellar performance during the action scenes, but also during the bigger poignant moments. Kane is an incredibly cool character and easily the best antagonist of the franchise by a long shot. The man, the myth, the legend. John Wick has finally come to terms with this arc's only outcome being death, but as he said before, he'll take as many as he can with him.
I'll kill them. I'll kill them all.
John Wick has fully transcended into the boogeyman we've heard about for the past 3 films, embracing his true violent nature, sold expertly by Keanu Reeves. Keanu is harder, better, faster, and stronger than he's ever been in his entire filmography, giving us one of his strongest on-screen performances since the early 2000s. In John Wick Chapter 4, no matter how small the role, every actor absolutely dominated the scenes they were in, never overshadowing each other, dishing out not only incredible performances, but memorable characters as well.
Fighting Keanu Reeves.
It's hard work, man.
When it comes to the film's score, it retains the neon cyberpunk-esque electro-infused atmospheric elements of the previous films, but sadly doesn't come up with anything as memorable as the originals.
I was not expecting that.
It does, however, remix the John Wick theme best in comparison to its two predecessors, adding to the slickness and suave of the character. The score expands on a trend started in Chapter 3, introducing small flares of creativity in relation to the action, like adding a gunslinger motif when John Wick uses a revolver. In this film's case, infusing traditional Japanese instruments into the electronic heavy tracks when a character shoots with a bow. They're little details that are missed if not paying attention, but really pay off in the long run. I am glad to say the score doesn't emotionally manipulate you, with most of the poignant dialogue and fight scenes letting the actors and their characters shine. Although when John Wick is killing hundreds of NPCs, best believe the speakers are blasting all the way. On the cinematography side, the film is the best looking of the franchise, with action scenes prioritizing long tracking shots, making them easy to follow despite the screen filled with various things to focus on at once, especially during the insane third act. The cinematography is able to elevate Chapter 4's action to the next level, constantly using the sets to its advantage. For example, there's an elaborate sequence filmed entirely from above like a game of John Wick Hex, which in itself is a nice reference.
John fucking Wick. Indeed. Fuck.
The film boasts incredible landscape shots that convey a sense of grandeur from the locations visited, complementing characters like the Marquis de Gramont, who does everything in spectacular fashion. However, this brings us to the VFX critique, with some of the green screen backgrounds looking very out of place, which can pull you from the film at times, but doesn't go so far as to hinder your experience. John Wick Chapter 4 continues the trend of using well-placed lighting and neon color schemes to elevate its visuals, although not going so far as to color grade yellow and blue as the original had done.
Amen.
Finally, we're treated to the first use of slow motion during combat in the franchise, and although rare, I'm sad to say it did not add anything to the scenes, rather making a cool scene become suddenly awkward to watch. Thankfully, the slow motion knows this and doesn't overstay its welcome. Nonetheless, it is a beautiful motion picture.
You're goddamn right it is.
Did I personally enjoy the film?
Is that a trick question?
Fuck yeah, I did. Even with the story being very weak at first, I couldn't help but let it slide and embrace John Wick for what it has become, an action showcase. There were moments where I felt it dragged for a bit too long, but that never pulled me out of the experience, a more than worthy addition to the franchise. Although, as I stated in the intro, if you're solely a fan of the original and don't enjoy 2 and 3 because of how out of place they are in comparison, then Chapter 4 might not be for you. For everyone else,
it's something I never saw in my whole entire life. This is something different. And I went to a lot of movies, but I never seen nothing like this in myself. I tell everybody go see it.
in the end, John Wick Chapter 4 was an incredible action showcase, raising the bar to unseen levels of stunt performances and high-octane set pieces, sadly not fully justifying its bloated runtime, with the first 2/3 being the weakest of the franchise when it comes to storytelling. Nonetheless, memorable characters, spectacular visuals, and a powerful third act redeem it, leaving a very satisfying conclusion to the franchise. Thank you all for watching and sticking around this long. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do subscribe and drop a like if you did, and hopefully, I'll see you all next time.